So welcome everyone to the second of our 8 sessions in our outreach series. Today's session is on mobile services. My name is Christine Krieger and I am the professional development consultant for the Colorado State Library, and I will be acting as tech support for today's session. Today we are going to ask that you keep your video off and remain muted until we get to questions, and then we can, if we have time, we can feel free to turn on both video and audio to finish up with questions. You may also ask questions via chat. I'll be monitoring chat and make sure that questions get addressed. But without further ado, I am thrilled to introduce the staff from the High Plains Library and your fabulous presenters for today, Megan and Lindy. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you guys.
All right, hey everyone, thanks for joining us today on, this is our second session in the outreach series that we are doing. And we will be talking specifically about providing mobile library services today. I'm Lindy McCaleb, I'm an outreach librarian and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I am a bookmobile librarian here at the High Plains Library District. And my colleague is Megan Lowry, the mobile services supervisor, and her pronouns are she, her, and hers. Before we start, we would like to take a moment of mindfulness. The High Plains Library District would like to acknowledge with respect that the land that we are on today in Weld County is the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute nations and peoples. This was also a site of trade, gathering, and healing for numerous other Native American tribes. We recognize the indigenous peoples as original stewards of this land and all the relatives within it. We further acknowledge the forceful removal of the populations after the Medicine Lodge treaties and atrocities such as the Sand Creek Massacre. Our intentions are based on our desire to ground and acknowledge and support a state of change. We bring our increased awareness and consciousness into this space now and into the spaces we inhabit. We believe this land acknowledgement is a process of deepening our relationship to personal power and land. We acknowledge that we are strangers on stolen land. With this acknowledgement, we bring energy that infuses presence, clarity, and a deep longing to be in alignment. Thank you. All right, now to get started, just a little overview, some of the objectives of this presentation. Today we are going to give a little overview of the fleet of vehicles that we have in the High Plains Library District for our outreach services. We're going to talk a little bit about selecting a vehicle and finding the right vehicle that's fit for the jobs that you will need it for. We're going to talk a bit about staffing and mobile services, collection development and stocking vehicles, RFPs and vehicle construction, and a little bit about what that process looks like. We're going to talk some about maintenance and repair, training drivers, and some safety considerations on the road. Just a little overview of the vehicles that we have in our fleet. I like to call it our armada. Maybe it's not quite big enough for that though. So first we have our bookmobile. In this photo, it's the biggest vehicle. And this is a Winnebago RV. We just got this in 2019. We also have an early literacy vehicle, which is pictured on the far right in this picture. And it is a Ford Transit van. We also have a lobby stop vehicle, which is the second from the right in this photograph, which is a Mercedes Sprinter van. And then we also have our pop-up experience library, which is a Ford F-250 with some modifications. And we provide that for events mostly. So a little bit more about our bookmobile. The bookmobile mostly is used to serve rural communities. We take it all over Weld County. It's a very large county, so we cover a lot of ground. And we also take it to underserved city neighborhoods, most of the time apartment complexes or community spaces. We also mostly take this to rural schools in particular. But we're moving to a new service model. We used to visit quite a few schools in Weld County, but we're trying to direct our services more to a community service model, so that we're serving more of a whole community other than just students at a school. A little more about the types of services that we provide on our bookmobile. This is a boarded vehicle, so patrons are allowed to go onto the bookmobile, and we have shelves with materials for them to check things out on. We provide material checkouts. We have public computers, public printing. We're really excited. We finally got a printer and scanner on the bookmobile, so people are allowed to utilize that service. And we also have public Wi-Fi that is available on our bookmobile. We provide on and off vehicle programs with our bookmobile, which includes story times, as well as some events. In this photo up on top, you can see there is a canopy that pops out, which is really nice in the summer. So yeah, we provide mostly material checkouts with the bookmobile. We have regular materials, books, audiobooks, CDs, DVDs, but we also provide specialty checkouts through our bookmobile services. We keep state park passes on the bookmobile for checkout, but then people can also request specialty checkout items like telescopes, computers, etc., and then we'll bring them on the bookmobile to the patrons. A little bit of information about our Sprinter van. This is the vehicle that we utilize for lobby stops, which is a cart service where we have the several carts loaded on the vehicle that are latched onto the vehicle. And then we have a wheelchair lift that then takes the carts off of the vehicle, and then we will take the carts into a building. A lot of the time it's retirement homes, nursing homes, community centers, where we will set up an impromptu library space. This is not a boarded vehicle, so patrons will never enter the vehicle. So we mostly take carts around. And our priority populations that we serve with this vehicle are the seniors. So as I mentioned before, we go to a lot of retirement homes, senior living spaces, community living spaces, as well as our transitional populations, which includes the local halfway house and alternative homes for youth, which is a local youth center here.
So this is our transit van. The primary purpose of our transit van is for early literacy. You can see the design on this vehicle is geared towards our youngest patrons. With this vehicle, we do a lot of service to our scenes. So that is Colorado Early Education Network. These are the Head Starts. And we have 12 different scene sites here in Weld County, and we provide 37 story times every month to those 12 sites. After the story time, each kid also gets to check out one book. So with that, we are doing cart service. So just like with the Sprinter van, no patrons are boarding this vehicle. We take carts off and into the different facilities and have checkout that way. This vehicle also has some regular routes that are overflow from our lobby stops. For example, we take this vehicle to the Mead Senior Lunch once a month, and that's mostly just because our lobby stop van was already committed during that time when we took that new route on. This vehicle also tends to serve as our backup vehicle to the lobby stop and bookmobiles when they're in the shop or otherwise out of commission. So during the height of the pandemic, we also used our transit van pretty heavily instead of our bookmobile. So we did this for a couple of different reasons. We did this to dissuade people from boarding the bookmobile because as you all know, if we had had our bookmobile, people would have wanted to come on board. So that was a main reason. Another important reason that we did this was to save on just gas and mileage of our bookmobile and the wear and tear on that vehicle. So pictured here in this video, in this picture, is our transit van out on route during the pandemic. We also have some regular summer stops that we use this vehicle on. So we use it at our International Neighborhood Program, Discovery Bay story times, community events, and many more. So that is our early literacy transit van. Here we have our pop-up vehicle, and the purpose of our pop-up vehicle is primarily for events and community engagement. This is the vehicle that we typically take to events such as Food and Flick Fridays, Monster Day, District 6 Kickoff, Multicultural Festival, and many, many more. This vehicle has also been in demand from our branches during the pandemic in order to provide outdoor story times. This is the vehicle that is most requested by the community, and we try to accept as many community requests as we can, provided we have the staffing and availability. These requests can be for large community events, such as the ones listed here, or they can also be for very small specialized events like a charity event or a neighborhood resource event, those types of things. So pictured here, we have our pop-up vehicle all decorated for a Halloween event, and you might be able to tell it has a very specialized Halloween theme collection. So we try to change out the collection and make it very specialized on this vehicle. We also used this vehicle very heavily this summer to provide some reoccurring summer programming and checkout services to some of our sites like International Neighborhood and Houston Gardens, where it's just not feasible for us to take our large bookmobile. There's just not the parking. We can't get our bookmobile into those sites. We also partnered with a local elementary school to provide programming and checkout services to their summer school kiddos with this vehicle. So generally speaking, our district does not have a home delivery service like many other outreach departments at other libraries. However, during the height of the pandemic, when local buses weren't running and people had even more barriers to library services, the branches identified patrons that would benefit from a home delivery service. So we temporarily offered home delivery service to patrons on an as-needed basis. To do this, it was very important that staff not use their personal vehicles, as there was still so much that we didn't know about the virus and how it spread at that time. So staff were utilizing this vehicle for that temporary service. And similar to the transit, this vehicle is also utilized as a backup in the event that primarily our bookmobile is out of service. So this vehicle has gone out on bookmobile routes when that vehicle is out of service.
Can I interrupt with one quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Someone is curious about what Monster Day is.
I just put it in the
Did
chat.
you?
Yeah, still typing away. Yeah. So yeah, Monster Day is just a large celebration in downtown Greeley that celebrates all things monster with a anti-bullying theme to it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. And Lindy just worked that one last month, so she knows all about it.
All right. Sorry, looking at the questions. All right, so a little bit more about housing your vehicles. I hear a lot of questions often about, like, do you really need a garage for your vehicles? Or people ask about trying to convince their management that they need to get a garage. And really, it's very important to consider before getting a vehicle how you're going to house the vehicle. It is important to have some sort of shelter to be able to protect it from the weather and from the elements. This not only keeps it comfortable and safe, but it also helps to keep things looking good. It makes the wrap or whatever paint job you have on it look good. It ensures that you don't get hail damage or anything during weather, and there's not a lot of wear and tear from the weather. So it's a very good idea to make sure you consider how you're going to house the vehicle. Aside from weather protection, it really helps to be able to have somewhere where you can have things stored in your garage for other programs, or to stage your carts for loading and unloading. In this picture, as you can see, we have a ton of storage in our garage. This is just one of our 4 parking spots for our vehicles. It's really important also to consider what you want in your housing area, whether it's a garage or just a lean-to or something. To be able to know what you need before you purchase the vehicle. For example, here we have bumpers and guiding lines to help us make sure that we're not pulling too far forward or too far backwards, so we're not closing garage doors on the vehicles. So it's really important to have that, and to make sure that you have space to walk around your vehicle, so that you can load things and comfortably and safely get inside without hitting things. It's also important to make sure you consider shorelines if you're going to be plugging your vehicle in. With our vehicles, it's very important to make sure that we are keeping the batteries charged, and with our bookmobile to make sure that the generator is running healthy. So you may need to make sure that you have shorelines and that you have them on the correct side of where the vehicle is going to need to be plugged in. When we first got our new bookmobile, we had installed the shoreline on the opposite side of where the shoreline would be plugging in, because it was on the different side from where our old bookmobile was. So we had to switch around where things went in the garage because of this. If you do have shorelines for your vehicles, make sure you consider also drainage for water. Or how you're going to be having your electrical cords on the ground, or if they'll be on the ground or not, or hanging from the air. A couple of years ago, when we were having this beautiful garage that we have now built, we were storing our vehicles in a garage at one of our branch libraries, which it was a very small space, but there was no drainage in that garage really, and there were no in the air shorelines like we have now. So everything was running on the ground, which created kind of a dangerous situation during the winter when we would come in with snowy vehicles, which would then melt, and then there would be puddles on the floor where our shorelines would be running. So we had to modify that to make sure it's safe. So make sure you consider all the kinds of things that you will be needing when you are purchasing a vehicle, to make sure that you're safe and protecting your vehicle. Just also consider what else you want to use that garage space for. Whether you're going to need storage, what kind of shelves you're going to need, if you're going to need cabinets, if you want to have programs in that space, or if you're going to need to wash your own vehicles. If you need water access, you need to think of that ahead of time, or how many outlets you're going to need. Also, as well as a good ventilation system is important. It's important not to have too much heat or cool air during the different seasons, as well as you want to have good circulation so that there's not a lot of carbon monoxide building up.
Okay, so when you are thinking about staffing, it's definitely something to take into consideration when you are doing outreach. So you want to be thinking about what kind of staff do you want or need in order to be able to provide mobile services. Do you need staff to be full-time, or can part-time staff fill your needs? What type of positions and pay do you have available to staff? Do you have only library associate positions? Do you have librarian positions? All of that sort of thing. For us, we almost always send 2 staff on every single route. Of course, we do have a few exceptions, such as if we are meeting another staff member on site, we might only have one person in the vehicle driving to the site. And then sometimes, we do have staffing shortages. Somebody calls in sick, and we can't find a sub or replacement to cover that route. Depending on the route, we may send one person. We also have both library associates and librarians going out on routes. So ideally, we have a librarian on every single route that we do, and the librarian serves as the person in charge and the lead should there be any issues, which are bound to arise either from patrons, technology, mechanical issues, the list goes on. Things are bound to happen. So staff in outreach need to have many additional skill sets and experiences that generally aren't required of most library staff. Some of these skills include the ability to drive large vehicles, the ability to lift and carry heavy crates and push carts through rough terrain. Some of our sites have unpaved parking or roads which we have to push our carts through the dirt, and during winter, of course, we have to push carts through snow and ice, so that can definitely be difficult. Staff need to be very dependable and responsible. When you are sending staff out into the community, you need to be able to trust that they can handle most anything that comes their way and that they represent your library very well. And also, staff should be very patron-centered. Again, outreach staff are often the face of the library. So you want to have people who are, have a kind, happy, friendly face that is very welcoming, which most library staff are. But anyway, so you will also need to know if your staff are going to be responsible for the vehicle maintenance. Do you have a facilities department, or are you going to be taking your vehicles somewhere else for vehicle maintenance? That's definitely something to consider. However, to some degree, even if someone else is handling your vehicle maintenance, the outreach staff will also need to be able to troubleshoot and recognize any maintenance needs and issues. Again, these things are bound to come up and staff need to be able to deal with them. But really and truly, the most important skills of outreach staff are problem solving, adaptability, and flexibility. Staff need to be able to roll with whatever comes their way.
So a little bit about collection development, because if you're going to have vehicles for library services, you need to have library materials to carry on said vehicles. So just a little basics about our collections. At the High Plains Library District, most of the branch libraries have a floating collection, which so if someone checks something out at one library but returns it to another, it'll stay at the library it was returned to, and all of the items are requestable. But our collection in our outreach department is a suppressed collection that is not requestable by the public. So it stays in outreach on our vehicles so that we can ensure that our patrons have access to the same kinds of materials they could get at the library, but might not have the access to place the holds for themselves. So we do keep very new materials on the bookmobiles. We have the newest items. As soon as the branches get it, we get it as well. And we do try to rotate the materials from the vehicles to make sure that the same items aren't always on the bookmobile every time someone comes to the bookmobile. We do kind of focus our audiences on what vehicles we serve them with based on what materials are going to be on those vehicles. So on our bookmobile, we're going to have a pretty wide variety because we see a wide variety of types of people. So we have lots of picture books, lots of chapter books, nonfiction for children, lots of teen books, as well as adult fiction, nonfiction, audiobooks, and movies. And we also have a good-sized Spanish collection on the bookmobile as well. But then on our transit van, which is our early literacy vehicle, we have pretty much only picture books, easy readers, that kind of stuff, because we are primarily serving preschools and young children with that vehicle. And then with our Sprinter van, we have, which is our lobby stop vehicle, we mostly carry DVDs, large prints, and audiobooks, as well as a couple carts with a variety of materials. Since we serve alternative homes for youth with that vehicle, we also have a cart with a lot of teen books and graphic novels. And then our pop-up library is unique because the event that it is going to depends on what kind of collection we curate. So we curate a collection out of the overall outreach collection fitting that event. So if it's an event where there's going to be a lot of Spanish speakers, it's going to be a lot more Spanish materials. Or if it's an event that is Halloween themed, it's going to be a lot of monster and Halloween themed materials. So we store our collections, a lot of them on the vehicles, but we also have a collapsible shelving in our base of operations that we have for overflow. So then we can start restocking things when we return and make sure that we keep the vehicle stocked at all times. So that's something that you want to consider when you do go on mobile services, is to have a set schedule for restocking. If it's the people who are going on a route to restock the morning of, to make sure that they have everything they need before they leave, or if it's the responsibility after you return from a route to restock, so the people the next day don't have to. We usually make sure that we restock our vehicles after returning from a route. That way, the morning of a route, you don't have to worry about it. Though we do have very good collections on our vehicles, we also provide a lot of holds to our patrons as well. So that's a large part of our library associates' job, is to place holds, process holds, and prepare the holds for the places that we go. So I don't know the numbers, but we circulate a lot of materials that are just hold based for our patrons as well. And a little bit more about collection development. If you are just starting out with a mobile services department or just the vehicle, it's important to consider whether you want to have a shared collection with your other library or library district, or if you want to have an individual collection. Cost-wise, it might cost more at first to create your own collection and not to share it with other people, but it does, I think in the future, it might offset that cost just by being able to have those materials available and ready for patrons. So it's something that's each library kind of has to decide for themselves what is best for them. Right.
Okay, so when you are ready to purchase a vehicle, you start with an RFP, or a request for proposal. So we're going to go over this very briefly here. So in your RFP, you want to identify the purpose of the vehicle. So as Lindy and I just went through, our 4 vehicles, each one has a very clear purpose and intent for our district. And then you will also want to identify which features you feel are required and what features are more optional for your needs. So here's just kind of a snippet of what that might look like. You'll also want to consider the size of your vehicle and whether or not a CDL or a commercial driver's license will be required. So if a CDL is going to be required to drive the vehicle, then that needs to be taken into consideration when staffing and training, as that's obviously going to be much more involved. When we had our bookmobile built, it was very important to us that we specify that our vehicle not require a CDL. And so our bookmobile and its dimensions are just under what would be required for a CDL. So our staff do not have to have that. Another thing that was very important to us when we put out our RFPs for all 4 of our vehicles was giving preference to local options or local builders. And this might be important as you will likely need to work with your builder for repairs and future upgrades. Just within the last couple months, we added a rear step to our pop-up vehicle as an added feature. That after using the vehicle for several years, we really identified that that was a high need and something that we wanted to add. And so you will likely also use your builder of the vehicles for any warranty work. And if the builder isn't local, then this will take up precious time and energy away from your services and of your staff to be able to take it in for those repairs or updates or modifications, what have you. And you know, obviously sometimes a local option isn't available. So you would just want to identify how that would play into the future work and other modifications of your vehicle. So maintenance and repair is definitely critical when dealing with vehicles. This is also what gives me the most headaches, as there's always some sort of issue going on at all times. And maybe that's just because we have 4 vehicles, but there's bound to be something going on. So one of the things that we have developed are pre and post inspections for all of our vehicles. So every vehicle's pre and post inspection is slightly different based on the vehicle. Here you can see just a portion of our Bookmobile's pre-inspection. And so we have these forms based in FormStack, but a paper-based system works as well. That's what we did before we had FormStack, or any other sort of form, Google Forms, that sort of thing. So in the pre-inspection, we're tracking things like the mileage, checking for leaks, checking the tires, checking brakes, blinkers, windshield wipers, making sure that all of those things are working before we ever leave the garage. And, you know, again, each vehicle is a little bit different. So for example, in our Bookmobile, our pre-check has questions related to the generator. So did you check the generator oil? What are the hours of the generator? That sort of thing. And then if you have questions about vehicle specific questions, or what the pre-inspection looks like for a specific vehicle, I'd be happy to share that with anyone. In our post-inspection, you know, again, are any dashboard lights on? Did you add any fuel? If so, how much? Reminding staff to plug the vehicle into the shoreline, reminding staff to restock the vehicle. So restocking the vehicle, Lindy talked about a little bit about that, but not only does that include our materials, but it might also include supplies such as our PPE that we have, library card applications, all of that sort of thing. So restocking the vehicle includes more than just the materials. And our pre and post inspection forms are, you know, constantly evolving as situations change and needs arise. So we recently realized that the iPhone in our pop-up vehicle wasn't charging properly. So we needed to charge it outside of the vehicle. So we simply added a question onto the pre-check, reminding staff to grab the phone, and in the post-check to remind staff to plug the iPhone in upon return. So they're all a little different based on the needs of the vehicle and you know, what other things we have going on. And then also to help with maintenance and repair, I, along with our outreach manager, we conduct a weekly walkthrough on all 4 vehicles. During these walkthroughs, we're simply looking at the vehicles, taking stock of things like scratches and dings and chips and miscellaneous pieces, trash, general upkeep of the vehicles, anything and everything you could think of. We're just trying to take note of those things. So you'll definitely want to consider your regularly scheduled maintenance of vehicles. So just like your home vehicle, things have to be maintenanced on a regular basis. So this includes things like your oil changes, generator service, lift maintenance. All of these things require, your regularly scheduled service. However, you do need to plan ahead. For example, I called last week to schedule an oil change for our Sprinter van, and the soonest available appointment that they had was for February. So that's, 6 months down the road. Many of the repair shops in our area, you may be noticing this as well, have been very short-staffed lately, and getting an appointment can be difficult sometimes. We also run into a lot of scheduling issues with our bookmobile, where it's very difficult to schedule same-day service. So when I call to schedule an appointment, they often want us to leave our bookmobile there for a week or more, and that's just not plausible, because that would interrupt our services. So in order to get those and schedule those same-day service appointments, I'm often booking out, 2, 3, 4 months out in order to make those appointments. So a couple of pictures here. Pictured here on the left is our extra batteries for many of the upfitted features in our Sprinter van. So when we purchased our Sprinter van, they had installed unsealed batteries, which require regular monthly maintenance in the form of adding water to the batteries. However, due to acid in batteries, our HR department didn't want staff to perform this task. So therefore, we had to schedule monthly visits to our local repair shop in order for them to check the batteries and make sure water didn't need to be added, and if it did, then to add the water as needed. We have since replaced these batteries with sealed batteries, which don't require that regular maintenance, because that was a huge headache for us to regularly schedule that every month. And then the photo on the right is the lift on our transit van. So as I mentioned, the lifts also have to be regularly serviced. All of our lifts, we have lifts on the bookmobile, the transit van, and the Sprinter van, are all actually wheelchair lifts. And they need to be serviced after so many rotations. And then this is something that like our maintenance staff are not trained on. And so it's something that we would have to take into the repair shop for those regular tune-ups and servicing. Okay, so when you have to do vehicle repairs, that's never fun, and it definitely impacts your services since you can't take your vehicle out and about. So for us, we typically have planned into our rotation that we don't typically have routes on Fridays or toward the end of the month. And that is intentional to allow that time to be able to schedule for those routine maintenance and any repairs that we have. And depending on the type of repair and the cause of the damage, you may need to work with your insurance in order to be able to, before you can do those repairs. You'll also want to know if any repairs are still under warranty, and if the repair work is to an upfitting feature or a standard feature. And then you'll also want to take into consideration whether or not you can do the repairs in-house or if you have to take it to a shop. And so that's all going to impact who can do the repairs and how long it may take. So pictured here, I have just some of the repairs that we've had to do in the last month. So the top photo, you can kind of see we had a cracked windshield in our pop-up vehicle. So before I could even, you would think that would be an easy one, just call, the window repair place and they come and switch it out. But before I could schedule the repair work, I had to work with our insurance, create a claim. I needed to create a commercial account with the windshield company, and in order for us to be tax exempt and have a tax exempt account, and all of that good stuff. So it was actually several weeks before I could even schedule an appointment, because there was a lot of back work that needed to take place first. Since this crack was repaired and fixed, we've also had chips in our bookmobile and our transit vehicles. Literally days after I had a chip fixed in our bookmobile, we got 2 more on one of our rural routes. So if you live in Colorado, you probably know that chips in windshields, that's a pretty big constant. And especially for our bookmobile, the windshield is extremely expensive. And so you want to get those chips repaired before they have an opportunity to crack and split. So definitely something to try to schedule as soon as possible. We have an appointment on Friday for those 2 chips to be repaired, and hopefully we don't get any others. So the bottom left photo here shows some trim that was coming off of our bookmobile door. This was a really simple in-house repair for us, which our maintenance staff were able to simply glue the trim back on. Other really simple in-house repairs include things maybe like fixing latches, tightening bolts, replacing cartwheels, spot cleaning. You know, we try to do as much as we can in-house, if possible. The bottom right photo, you might be able to see, it's very small. There is a screw in our tire on our Sprinter van. So fortunately, it's not leaking air, and it's not something that we've addressed yet, but, you know, we are aware of it. It's something, you know, that will have to be addressed by a repair shop, but currently isn't causing us any issues. So when you get new staff and you have vehicles, first and foremost, you want to make sure to add those new staff members to your insurance. And if your vehicle requires a CDL, then you would also need to have your staff get a CDL license as well. So vehicle training can either be done in-house or with a contracted party. I know that many libraries work with like their local school district or a local truck training academy in order to train staff on their vehicles. We do ours all in-house. And, you know, it's definitely something that, you know, we're always changing and adapting and making sure that we're training our staff as best as we can. So our in-house driving training is conducted primarily by myself and Brittany, our move manager. This way we can ensure that staff are getting the same information across the board and that it's coming from a supervisor. So here in this picture, we have Brittany training some of our newest members on our bookmobile. And all of our permanent outreach staff are required to drive our vehicles. And so, you know, they have been trained on the vehicles. We do also have some subs, which we have trained to drive our vehicles and added to our insurance. However, generally, subs do not ever drive the bookmobile, just due to, you know, the large size of the vehicle. But we do have some of our subs driving our smaller vehicles. So we also train our staff on the general maintenance and care of our vehicles. We do this primarily through the use of our pre and post inspections. And We also have all of our emergency supplies and make sure that staff know what to do in the event of an accident or breakdown. So now Lindy is going to talk to us a little bit more about emergency and vehicle safety.
Yeah, so a little background. I just this year have updated my department's emergency and weather policies. We had some policies in place, especially regarding weather, inclement weather before, but I just made it a little more robust so that we can be more prepared as much as possible in the event of something happening. So it's really important to have policies written down. I know you always hope that nothing bad will happen, but it's good to have policies in place in case something happens, that your staff know exactly what to do. Because sometimes during a stressful situation, you don't know what to do. Your brain freezes a little bit. So it's good to have that written down, and where staff know where to find that information so that they're they can take some action. So it's good to consider topics such as inclement weather in your policies. This could be anything from blizzards to hailstorms, thunderstorms, tornadoes. As you all know, in Colorado, the weather changes very quickly and drastically throughout the seasons, and even sometimes within the same day. So it's important to be able to be prepared for different weather situations. For example, our former policy did not consider flash flooding, but back in, what was it, 2013, I think it was, during those floods, I know that Weld County really experienced a lot of flooding during that time. So it's important to be able to be prepared for anything, even if you don't know if it's going to happen. So it's good to look into that. And if you guys have any questions about specific examples from those policies, please let me know and I can send you an email with some excerpts from the policies or a copy of the policies that I created. It's also important to be able to train your staff and have policies about what happens in the case of an accident. Even if it's just little things like, backing into another vehicle, which isn't quite a little thing because there'll be a lot of paperwork involved with that, to major accidents or blowouts. It's important, especially with a big vehicle, that your staff feels comfortable driving, but also so that they're prepared in the case of an accident. And it's important to make sure that they understand driving safety and are updated on weather conditions, and are aware of how to drive in certain conditions such as rain and snow. But also it's important to have policies and procedures in place for emergencies such as medical emergencies. What happens if a staff member is out on a route and they have a medical emergency, or what happens if a patron is on the vehicle and has a medical emergency. It's important to keep a first aid kit stocked on the vehicle for that case. Also, some bodily fluid cleanup kit in case a child throws up on the vehicle or something. You want to make sure that you're being safe and clean, and taking care of people. It's also important to make sure that you are prepared for fires. It is a good idea to have fire extinguishers on every vehicle, multiple fire extinguishers if it's a larger vehicle probably, as well as fire blankets. They could come in handy as well. And staff should know what to do in the case of a fire, because as you know, it could be very dangerous if a fire spreads to an engine or to a gas tank. Uh, yeah, it's also important to keep policies and procedures for any kind of situation, including, as much as we don't want this to happen, an active shooter situation. It's sad that we have to come to this, but it's important to have that kind of consideration as well. And it's important to be able to train your staff so that they know what to do in the case of harassment or threatening behavior. If someone comes into your library space or on your vehicle and are being disruptive and angry or violent, it's important to be able to know how to act. And it's good to have those policies in place. That way you can back up your actions in case you do have to remove someone from a vehicle or from a space. We have incident reports that we have to fill out in the case of something like that. Then everyone involved fills out an incident report or contributes to the report. But we also have measures in place for suspending library patrons. And it's a little confusing in outreach services because a lot of the time you're not in your own space. So you're not actually in the library or something. You might be in someone's apartment building. But we in the High Plains Library District have our policies setting that our library space, whether it's in the lobby of an apartment building or something, within that space, people have to follow our library rules. And I see a question in the chat that says, do we all have a spare key in case we get locked out? Yes, we do. And that has almost happened before to me. So that's also something very good to keep in mind, is to keep spare keys in case something like that happens. Also, just a couple of emergency materials to keep stocked on your vehicles. I just went through all of our vehicles and made sure that we were well stocked on things like fire extinguishers, first aid kits, but as well as other things such as duct tape, emergency blankets, flares, heavy duty gloves that can be used, when it's really hot and you might be touching metal or something, or when it's really cold and you don't want to, freeze your hands. Maybe even food and water in case you get stranded, in a blizzard or something. We even had staff members a couple times go out on a route on a day, blue skies in the morning, but then by noon, there's a bad blizzard, and they luckily they were able to get back safely without being stranded, but it's always a possibility. All right. This next slide is just a little lightness, I guess, after talking about all the bad things that can happen. I like to call this the inevitable, because I don't know if many of you have driven library vehicles, but it is almost impossible to keep all the books on the shelves while you're driving. I've had children before ask me, how do you keep the books from falling off the shelves? And I tell them, we don't. So I like to tell everyone they're not part of the mobile services team until they dump the books. So here are some pictures of times that we have dumped the books on all of our vehicles. 3 of the 4 pictures are when I was driving and dumped the books on the vehicles. And it's just a good reminder to keep a good attitude and humor while you're on the road. It's very stressful driving large vehicles, especially ones that don't belong to you and belong to the organization. But it's important to keep a good humor and keep your head level, because really, despite all the bad things that might happen, or how hard the day may be, or how many times you have to pick up books because you dumped them when you turned, it's worth it to be able to provide these services to our communities and bring library materials to people who may not be able to get into the library to get them themselves. All right, next slide. All right, are there any other questions? I know we've had quite a few in the chat, so thank you. But yeah, anyone have any more questions? Feel free to unmute yourselves if you want to speak aloud. And here's our contact information. If you have any more questions or would like some more information about some of the policies or the form stacks that we discussed.
Yeah, and I think both Megan and Lindy were great about getting the questions out of the chat. So they were, Sandy's asking if you could talk a little bit more about what services you do with the halfway houses.
Yeah, Megan, do you want to answer this one?
Yeah, so we take our lobby stop vehicle and we do cart service at So the two sites that we do is ICCS, so the Corrections Intervention Community Correction Services, and Alternative Homes for Youth. So, you know, we take our carts in, we do checkout services. At those sites, folks are allowed to check out 5 items at a time. And then we also try to do some of our regular programming there. We've just started doing some tech programming at ICCS, so doing some job search classes and things like that, as well as other things that may be of interest to those folks. For the Alternative Homes for Youth, we try to do lots of you know, we take our summer reading programming to them. We do different you know, things of interest to try to get those folks like on board and get them engaged. You know, during the pandemic, we've taken lots of take and make kits to alternative homes, and they have really enjoyed those different kits and things like that. So definitely, you know, they're allowed to check out up to 5 items. That includes, you know, movies, books, CDs. The CDs are really popular at alternative homes. So that's pretty much what we do at those facilities.
So what routine maintenance have you performed on your lifts and where do you take them?
So our lifts so far are actually so new that we haven't reached that milestone yet, but we are getting close. And we would just take those to so we have a local repair shop that's kind of like a mom and pop shop that has really been our like tried and true service providers. And so they would be able to just service that, you know, making sure that everything's running smoothly. There are service checkpoints that they do on those lifts. But that's who we would take it to our local kind of repair shop. They cover all 4 of our vehicles. They do a great job. And you know, we support our local services that way.
Looks like we have another question that says, do you have issues with screen glare on the computers when you're outside? And if so, do you have glare screens that you can recommend? The first part of that question, yes, we have issues with it. Secondly, no, we don't have glare screens that we can recommend. I usually just turn up the brightness on my computer as much as I can, and we try to set up our canopies when we're outside so that we are a little protected from the sun, but a lot of the time, none of the shade is under the canopy where we are set up. So a lot of the time we just kind of fight through it. But glare screens are a great suggestion, and thank you for that.
We're always learning new things too, so.
Yes, and if anybody who is on today has a good idea for glare screens, feel free to add it to the chat. We can all learn from one another. Any other questions for our presenters today?
And Megan, do you want to go to the next slide? Yeah, so if you don't have any more questions, please attend our upcoming presentations. Our next one next week will be on outreach services. And so we have a lot more of these outreach series presentations coming up, so please join us.
Excellent. Well, like I said, if we don't have any other questions, I want to thank everybody for attending today and asking such fabulous questions. And I really want to thank both of our presenters, Megan and Lindy, for providing such fabulous in-depth information. I'm going to see if I can get a copy of the slides from them that I can post with the archive. And everybody who attended today, as well as everybody who was on our wait list, will get a copy of the archive by tomorrow. So once again, thank you guys for such a great presentation. And I hope everybody who attended today has a great rest of your day.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.